All right. Well, thank you, Roshni. That was an awesome mix that you played for us today. And welcome to our Higher Education Tableau User Group meeting for March 2025. We're so glad you could join us for our packed agenda today. We're going to open the floor for announcements in just a moment. And then we'll have our Meet a Community member for the month, which is Christian Adams from the University of Washington. And then we're going to have back-to-back March Maskness and March Madness presentations. The first being by Rebecca Carr from Southeast Community College, David Liška from Southern Methodist University, and James Emery from Georgia Institute of Technology. And then March Madness is brought to us by Arty Smith from the Kent Dover School. We'll have a quick wrap up and chat, including a Tableau Conference Know Before You Go special and our typical breakout rooms. So before we get into Meet a Community member, though, did anyone have any announcements they'd like to make? We invite you to come off mute or put it in the chat either way. All right, well, if you think of anything, feel free to go ahead and put it in the chat there like C. Teaker did. We also have, if you have job postings you want to share with the group, we also have a site on our channel on our HETUG Slack group where you can do that. And I'm sure that Roshni put that link in the chat earlier in case you missed it. All right, so we'll go ahead and jump in to our Meet a Community member with Christian Adams. Christian is an analyst for the University of Washington, where he has worked for almost 13 years. And while he's historically worked mostly with financial data, he recently started a role that has him working with student, faculty, and research data. So if anyone has lessons learned, he's open to hearing about it. So Christian, go ahead and start by telling us a little bit about yourself and describing your role and your team.
Yeah. So thanks for having me. This is fun, and not something I thought I'd ever do. So this is exciting for me to get a chance to do this. So as you said, I've worked for the University of Washington for almost 13 years. Love it there. Love my work there. Primarily financial work. But recently, our organization underwent a huge restructuring. And so I got placed into a division that reports to the provost, reports to the CFO, who reports to the provost. And we're institutional analytics and decision support. And so our charge is new, and we're still finding our way, but it's really about making the connections between data and information and decision support at the highest levels of our university. So it's a really exciting time to be a part of that division. I was placed into that division because I've been working with Tableau for a number of years. I really enjoy visual analytics, and I have a strong background in the finances of the university. But now, like you said, I'm starting to have to tap into faculty and student data in a way I haven't had before. We just completed a project for our annual planning process that showcased financial, student, and faculty data on one groupings for the first time in that process. So it's an exciting time to be doing that kind of work and being at the university.
Definitely. You've kind of already touched on question two, but if you want to elaborate any more on what type of data you work with.
Yeah. So my role has historically been primarily financial data, and it was interesting to me because up until about 2 or 3 years ago, the University of Washington had its own financial system that was built internally, I think built sometime in the 70s or 80s. It was COBOL based. And so if you were skilled in the University of Washington's financials, it only applied to the University of Washington. And your skill set was, I can learn data structures faster than probably most people you know. So it was cool to sort of have this niche information. But we just switched over 2 or 3 years ago to Workday. And so it's been an interesting transition. And so we're learning about the structures that come with Workday. Additionally, like I said, I'm starting to learn about student and faculty data, the difference between things like paid FTE and appointed FTE. Title tracks of faculty are something I haven't had to do a lot of work with before. Learning about the different type of student credit hours and how they're attributed, different ways to do that is pretty exciting, but it's also a lot of new information for me. So it's a bit overwhelming, but fun.
Definitely like drinking from a fire hose, I would say.
Yeah.
So tell us a little about how you use Tableau at work.
Yeah, so I started using Tableau a number of years ago, and I got my role in the Central Seattle office because I had built some financial dashboards for our chancellor and have sort of set the stage for what I could do. And so for about 4 or 5 years in Central Seattle, I was building financial dashboards for our leadership groups. And so it was doing everything from monitoring indirect cost recovery at the university, trend analysis in that way, to what's the financial health of a school or college in particular, doing things like month's funds on hand. And so a lot of dashboards that were there to support decision makers and be proactive in our monitoring of the university's financial health. The other thing I used Tableau for was I found it much easier just to investigate data using Tableau, just seeing how data in a data table or warehouse was structured, looking for sort of how the data was coming in. And then I could also use it to find like errors in data sets much faster than my experience in Excel. I'm not very skilled in SQL. I can read it. I don't do a very good job of writing it. And I definitely can't sort of dump it into a table for ease of use. And so Tableau was a way to sort of tap into these data sets that said, how is it structured? How does revenue get categorized? What data points are in there? And it was much easier than exporting to Excel, testing it, and then doing a new export or something of that nature. And so I've used Tableau sort of in all those facets, and it's been extremely helpful.
Yeah, I have to agree with you when it comes to looking at how the data is set up and finding discrepancies. It's so good for that, the visual aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you have a favorite Tableau project that you've worked on?
My most rewarding one is I alluded to it, our sort of planning dashboards. So before I joined my team 4 or 5 years ago, the University of Washington had the annual planning process was where all of our schools and colleges and units told us how they were going to spend money for the next 4 to 6 years, depending on the year. And so prior to my arrival, every school or college would input their data on spreadsheets. They would each get a workbook. Each workbook would have like 10 or so tabs. And then our analysts in office would analyze it. And then we'd package the product for the president and provost to have their planning meetings over the course of a quarter. And those packaged materials were, in large part, some summary tables in Excel and the Excel spreadsheets submitted by the units. And so it was a binder that was, no hyperbole, like 2 to 3 inches thick, because it was 50 units providing 10 to 15 pages of tabs plus narrative and that sort of thing. And so it was just this massive thing that was basically overwhelming, and you'd spend most of your meeting just going through the pages. And so what we did my first year was we used Tableau to take all that financial data and compress it down into very focused visuals. And so we got that massive document down to like 2 pages per unit. And then we even had enough space to insert like a commentary section so that our leadership could say, president, provost, deans, VPs, our analysts have looked at the data. Here's the 3 areas we would tell you to focus on. And so it was it was one of my proudest achievements professionally. And it's a project that's continued on. So we're in like our 6th year of doing it. It gets a little bit better every year. They ask us to add a little bit more every year. And so it's something that has stuck. And so I'm proud of it, that it's been successful and that it continues to live on.
That sounds really incredible, actually. So oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it was definitely my biggest win in terms of adoption.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anytime you can go, and I'm visualizing the huge binder, anytime you can go from that to, a succinct and well presented. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. So, how long have you been using Tableau and how did you learn to use it?
Yeah, so I started probably about 10 years ago. And I started because prior to that, everything we were doing was in Excel. We'd pull out data, we dump it into an Excel, we build charts and tables and all those things. VLOOKUPs was one of my more powerful Excel formulas. I wish I had learned more about match and index, but I never got there. Um, and so we would build these reports for chancellors and deans, and then, data would get stale. We'd have to refresh. And it felt like I was always constantly rebuilding Excel spreadsheets and tables. And I know Excel's more powerful than I used it for, but it was just hard for me. And so our university had licenses to Tableau that were pretty cheap. And so I was like, let me give this a shot. And so I convinced my boss to put forward like the $50 a month to test it out. And so I started building just charts for myself to help do the work. And so I started just with trial and error mostly. Our university had tug groups that would meet, once a quarter, once every couple months, and I'd go to those to try to learn. But it was mostly trial and error, and it did not go well. I was very much one of those, if I can add a color, I will. If I can add a shape, I will. If I can do both, I definitely will. And so even as I was building it, I was like, I don't know what I'm looking at. And so when I finally decided to take the learning seriously, I got a lot of learning from, I bought Ryan Sleeper's book, Practical Tableau. Ryan Sleeper, I think, is the CEO or founder of Playfair Data. So
Yes.
I found his blog. I bought his book, and I really liked that book because it was simple views that did both how to build a chart, right? How to build a bar chart, how to build a stacked bar chart. But it also gave a really simple explanation as to why that chart was valuable or how it was. Here's how it makes sense, or here's how you think about using it. But it just really sped up my learning curve. And so I was very appreciative. And then uh, it was also, I don't do Twitter much anymore, but when I started, there was a huge amount of activity in the Tableau community on Twitter to where you could just send something out with hashtag DataFam if you had a question, and you would get 3 to 4 responses in like an hour. It's what the Slack channel is for me now. If I have a question, I can dump it in and somebody's going to respond. That's what Twitter was. And so I learned a lot from just connecting with community members via Twitter back in the day.
I see so many parallels between how you were learning Tableau and how I was learning Tableau around the same time. It's crazy how much has changed.
Yeah.
So, do you have a favorite Tableau feature?
Yeah. So my favorite feature is prep. I like prep because so like I said, I can read SQL. I can understand what's going on with people who write code. I struggle to write it. So when I first started wrangling data when I was with Excel, it was either an interface download from our financial system, which dumped it into Excel, or I would use Access because and the connecting tables. And so because that's how I learned. And so prep was an easy shift for me because of the visual component. So I could do that. I picked it up much faster than SQL, but it also allowed me not to have to rely on our data architecture team to curate data for me. And so it sped up my process. And so prep has been a really empowering tool for me to again test data, looking for errors, test structure, but also manipulate data in a way that I'm not skilled enough to do in SQL. And I now don't have to wait for a member of my data architecture team to have time to support a project. I can do it. And then as successful, I can take my prep and show it to my data architecture team and say, hey, here's what I did. Can you build a sustainable model of this in our warehouse?
Nice. I mean, you have a data architecture team, which is
Yes.
something.
I am blessed in that way. Yes, I know.
Yes. But yeah, prep is revolutionary.
Yeah.
What is something you'd like to learn more about in Tableau?
Yeah, so there are two things I keep saying I need to spend time learning. One is extensions. I don't understand extensions. I haven't spent enough time in, but the getting to a space where I could use them so I don't always have to build from scratch would be good. The other thing I've always wanted to learn and I just can't get there is it's called tab command or Tableau command. I forget what it is, but you use command prompts to do things. And it was shown to me as a way. So we do a lot of PDFing. And so like the planning dashboards I was telling you about, we have an online version that we provide to our CFO, but our president is not going to navigate to our Tableau server. She likes tangible copies, so we wind up PDFing it. And so I wind up PDFing 50 of these documents. And so it's just a lot of clicking. It's honestly nice to spend an hour just sort of listening to music and clicking through stuff. But tab command in theory would allow you to sort of run a command prompt and print them all, PDF them, dump them into a folder. And every time I try to learn it, I run into glitches, headway, and I just haven't been able to get myself over the hump. But it's something that would sort of automate some of the work. I can probably learn it through Python. So maybe my answer is better to learn Python to do some of these things. But yeah, I think that's where I want to skill up.
I have this sneaking suspicion that Roshni might be able to shed some light on that.
Yeah, I feel like I've tapped Roshni enough that I don't want to occupy her time anymore.
Understand.
Yeah.
So, if you could go back in time, what is one thing you wish you could tell Tableau newbie you?
Yeah, I think it would be just to keep it simple. I definitely at the time was trying to be fancier than I needed to be. I wanted to, uh, for lack of a better phrase, like show how smart I was and show how good I could build things in Tableau. And I just wind up losing users because I was trying to make things more complicated. I was trying to use more complicated visuals than I need. I think what I finally learned that like bar charts and line charts can probably do 95% of what I need, and to just stick with that, my dashboards got a lot better. So I think it would just be to keep it simple.
That's such good advice. I feel like you could have given me that advice too. Do you ever use Tableau outside of work? And if so, how?
So I've used it outside of work for there was a period of time where I was really into Makeover Monday and Workout Wednesday as a way to skill up.
Mhm.
I've since fallen off that and need to get back in. Specifically, Workout Wednesday is one I could definitely use. The other space I use it, I like fantasy football a lot. And so I've used Tableau to sort of understand uh, the variances of players and scoring because I've never really understood it. But Tableau has shown me like there is a huge difference between, the top wide receivers in fantasy football versus like a middling. Like the gap is not just binary 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a massive space gap. And so it's been fun to play with sports data in that way, just to sort of understand the underlying principles a little more.
I think sports data is such a good gateway data set
Yeah,
for newbies.
yeah, definitely.
So is there anything else you want to share before we go into our dashboard spotlight?
Yeah, I think it's just community, specifically Tableau community. I I've always, ever since I've been a part of it and doing Tableau, I've been impressed with the openness and willing to help of anyone who's a part of this community. It feels quite rare. And so tap into that community as much as you can. I mean, even if it's something as simple as like I'm probably once a month now going into the Slack random channel, just saying, I have this problem. Does anyone else face this like I did it last week? And you and Roshni and somebody else got me a solution. I'm like, yeah, that works. And so it fixed a work problem. And it's something I probably just would have muddled over if I hadn't asked.
Yeah, I do love the Slack group for that. For anyone on this who's not a member, you should definitely join.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are going to share your dashboard spotlight. Do you want to start by telling us a little bit about this dashboard, what you like about
Yeah.
it? why you chose it, what strikes you,
Yeah.
and how it's inspired you.
Yeah. So the URL is at the bottom. This is a pretty old dashboard. It's from Andy Kriebel. And it's labeled like profit and loss statement in his Tableau profile. And there's a couple of iterations in his profile, and this is proliferated across the public. I like this because I saw it years ago. And the first time I saw it, I was struck by the sheer quantity of data that was on the screen in a relatively small space, but it also felt readable. It didn't feel overwhelming. And so he used Superstore data to build a sort of profit and loss statement visually, um, which is a financial statement we commonly have to build. And at the time I saw it, I had also was building a profit and loss statement for my boss, but it was all text. And as I was building it, I just kept thinking, there's got to be a better way. It's so hard to consume this data. It's just a bunch of numbers. And I came across this, and it's a mixture of, so like each of these sections is a category, or it could be, any sort of classification. But then the top section is a pace chart, and so it shows you the bars the current year. The vertical line is the same point the previous year. There's the text section in the middle, which says what's the latest month on things like gross sales, and then how does it compare month over month. And then that bottom section is the line chart for a duration of time. And so you can see trends. So you see so much in the moment. Plus, there's coloring of are you meeting the goals or not? And so I was just really impressed with the quantity of data. And I actually wound up taking this design and building something similar for my boss. And then he loved it because he could see, really quickly, like, are we ahead or behind of last year in certain categories? Is our overall expenses up year over year? And is it compensation versus like OpEx? And so I was able to break out these views for him and give him a really quick way to see like trend analysis. And so I think that's why I liked it. And I've rebuilt this or parts of this numerous times in dashboards.
That's great. I actually can think of a use case immediately that I would use this for, and I might just do that.
Mhm.
So what did you learn from this dashboard, whether it's in terms of
Mhm.
data analysis, storytelling, how it was built, that you think
Yeah.
others might find interesting and informative?
Yeah. So I think was one of those where if you plan well what you want to show, you can show a lot of data in a small space. So like each of these boxes is like 100 wide by 200 tall, right? And so it's not a lot of pixel space, but you can do it. And so if you pick very strategically the components you want to do, you can get a lot of data on the screen. I think this is an excellent use of color, which was something I always struggle with, sort of the subtlety of color. And then I just thought it was a good use of a pace chart, which is that top section to show year over year comparison points, which for financial people is a huge data point that always keeps coming up. How am I doing compared to last year? It's a good sort of um, grounding for people making financial decisions.
I think those are all great takeaways. Well, thank you so much, Christian, for being our Meta community member this month. If anyone is interested in being a future Meta community member, please let us know. We are always excited to have a chance to highlight and introduce our community to everyone. And I'm going to turn it over to Roshni to introduce March Maskness.
Thanks, Ginny. So March Maskness came around, just like Christian mentioned, out of a question in the Slack channel. So Matt Beeman from UNC Chapel Hill asked, does anyone know of a way to obfuscate display data? No, it sounds like a weird request, but we have personnel data that we can't show real names on. And there's a bunch of different use cases where you want to be able to show maybe dummy data or show a sample of something to someone for feedback without actually displaying actual real information. But you want enough there for them to be able to react to or to provide feedback to on or whatnot. And we had a bunch of people say, oh yeah, I do this. I found this thing on a blog post. And we have a few of those folks here today. So we've got Rebecca Carr from Southeast Community College. She has worked in the past at University of Nebraska-Lincoln and at Vanderbilt. And having moved from working on data resources and decision support capabilities and institutional research, she's now focused on accreditation and planning and other strategic initiatives. And fun facts about Rebecca, her son is very, very tall. That's him in the Colorado shirt. And she and her husband share a house with 2 dogs and a backyard full of chickens. Jenny, did you hear that? Chickens. And all the chickens have names that are named after TV detectives, which brings warmth to my heart because I do nothing but watch TV. David Liška from Southern Methodist is also here. He's a senior data visualization specialist in the university's decision support office at SMU. And he's been an active participant in our Slack space as well. And then finally, James Emery, who works in IT at the Scheller College of Business at Georgia Tech, where he uses Tableau Specialty Prep to meet the needs of IT and occasionally other departments. So James, if you guys haven't seen his name in places, you're not looking in the Tableau forums because James is a Tableau forums ambassador and is all over the place there. And he also has a soft spot for TV, but this time British TV. And as well as movies, like the best movie winner lists for the Oscars, the BAFTA, the Golden Globes, and other top 100 lists like AFI, BFI, Variety, and Time. So those are all the introductions. I'm going to turn the screen share over to Rebecca to sort of start this deep dive into different ways of masking data. So go ahead and take it away, Rebecca.
Okay. Think this is working. You can confirm you can see it?
It is thinking.
Okay. Well, we are, as it's coming up, today is a snow day for me because we're in the middle of a blizzard. So I am home wearing my basketball gear. And it's my nephew who is on the Colorado team. And so I spent a lot of time this year back and forth to Boulder and had a good time with that. Can you see the screen now?
It is still thinking.
Okay.
At least for me, it's still thinking.
Yeah,
Well, let me.
for me.
It's
You wanna
still for everybody.
Yeah, maybe stop shares, try resharing.
So the problem with that is then I have to restart the PowerPoint.
Do you want me to share the screen and you can just tell me when to move?
Yes, I think that
Okay.
would probably be easiest. Whoops.
All right. There we go, I hope.
Yeah, that looks right for me.
Okay, great.
Unfortunately, I can't see you now. This is frozen for me. So I don't know what.
How about you start talking and I will move to the next slide when you tell me to. We're on the front.
I don't
The
know where
front
your
cover
slides are though, so because I can't see it.
So I'm on the
So-
front cover slide or the
Okay.
title slide.
So what we did was the reason I needed to anonymize data was for a presentation we did for HETUG a couple of years ago, where we were showing how how we were creating a student profile from responses to a survey. So I'm gonna, Roshni, I'm gonna kind of by memory tell you when to click. So I think if you'd click now, there's a picture of the profile.
Yep.
And it includes both personally identifiable information, if you would click, and then individual responses from the student that are not personally identifiable. And for the purposes of this, I just needed a simple way to show the results without identifying students. And so what we did, if you would click, this should say something about what we did. And
Yep.
the first thing was to just limit the information that was coming back from Qualtrics. So I did not bring back the student name. And then once it was in Tableau, created a very small extract. And then if you click, once the information was in Tableau, I did a couple of calculated fields to anonymize the information that was personally identifiable. And then the next screen, what I ended up deciding to do was to use the student ID as kind of the key thing. It's something that every student has that's different, but in and of itself, it's not going to provide any information to people outside the institution about who that student is. And so for the anonymized student ID, I took the final 4 digits of a 7-digit student ID for the anonymized student ID, and then click. I also use the student ID to create a calculated field for first name. And since there's more variability on the final character of a number, I use that last number to assign first names, and then click. And I use the final 2 digits of the student ID to assign a last name. And because this suited my purposes, I didn't make this any more complicated. And then if you click, then once those anonymized first and last names were created, I created the kind of a last name first and first name last versions, because that was to match the fields that were in the profile. And then if you click, and this screen shows, the only other personally identifiable information in there was email and phone number. So I basically hard coded that so everybody had the same email and phone number. And because this data source was Qualtrics, the code looks really goofy, but that was the code I needed to hard code student ID, email and phone number, and keep everything else the same. And that was basically what I did. I think that's the end of the meaningful conversation, the meaningful presentation. So it was a pretty straightforward, simple way to get what I needed for the purposes that I had it. I think
that was spot on with no
Okay.
visuals in front of you. That was amazing. But now we're looking at some chickens. So tell us about the chickens.
Oh, yes. So the chicken, that's 3 of our 4 chickens. The one that's not shown is Munch. Munch and Frankie are named from Homicide. Olivia is from SVU, and Jackie Brown is from a movie, but she's a cute little, she's a black silky chicken, and so we wanted to name her after a black female detective, and Jackie Brown was the one that we came up with. And they're starting to lay again. They probably won't be laying today because it is bad outside, but we're starting to get a lot of eggs.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. And David, if you want to steal the screen share and share your versions of masking.
All right. Thank you very much. That was really impressive, Rebecca. If I have that problem, Roshni, I don't think I'm going to be able to carry on quite as well. That was very impressive. So hopefully everybody can see the PowerPoint slide right now.
Yep,
and hearing me okay? Okay. So there are a couple different purposes for replacing values. There's the presentation of the information. So if we're running for like today's purposes, if we were just showing off our Tableau workbook and wanted to protect either FERPA or otherwise classified information, that would be one purpose. Another is if we want to distribute it. So this is more than just obscuring the values. In that kind of situation, we're actually removing them and replacing them. So I'm going to talk really briefly about a couple different, or one method for each of those. The first one's going to be a little bit similar to Rebecca's solution. Not exactly, but it's going to be specifically for showcasing it. So what the essence of the process entails is taking a list of the sensitive values, whether they be the student ID or first name, last name, phone number, any of those. And we're going to be going off of name here today, but basically coming up with some mock data, pasting a value adjacent to those, and then using a formula in Excel to basically populate a case statement that you can use. This is pretty easy to do. It doesn't require a whole lot of anything else, as long as you've got desktop available. And honestly, you could do it with WebEdit as well if you're in server or cloud. But some of the drawbacks is this still doesn't prepare it if you want to distribute. If you were looking at popping it up to Tableau Public or distributing it to somebody just to say, what are your thoughts on the display of this? And if that person wasn't properly approved to actually see the sensitive content, that wouldn't be a good idea with using this first method. It does get a little slow once you start getting into large data sets. Basically, every value that you've got in there is going to go through a case statement, and so you can imagine that would take a toll. And it does require Excel or another other spreadsheet software if you have OpenOffice or LibreOffice. Either of those would work pretty well. Another drawback, so this is ideally intended for whatever you're going to display on the screen. It's not going to replace necessarily every value in the entire data set that you might have. If you've got a historical record of 100,000 students, I wouldn't recommend using this method unless you're going to control in your presentation only going through a few handfuls of them or so. I'm going to share a workbook, and I'm not sure if I'm going to do that either through the Zoom chat or through Slack, but I've got a running list of about 320, 330 names to get people started, and we'll see those here real briefly. So I was talking about a spreadsheet, and this is a screenshot of what that would look like with the real data. I'm real in quotes here. So column A is pasted values from the Superstore data set, everybody's favorite. Column B is new full name, and that's just going to be names and first name, last name. And any of these can be repopulated to something else if you wanted to have a substitution for ID or address. You would just come up with your own list of what addresses that you'd like. Followed by that are a handful, and I'm only showing a couple here, but some formulas that do all the heavy lifting for you. So it looks at the column A value, and then for this particular column, it looks at column B, or I'm sorry, column C, and will generate a new name there. So that's basically all that's going on behind the scenes. It's pretty straightforward. The idea is that starting at the top, and we can walk through the case real quick here in a moment, but just selecting the word case, going down to the bottom of the list for as many values as you have, copying those, pasting those into a calculated field, and then putting a terminating end statement. And then you've got your case statement to translate that in. Then you'd replace it in the workbook. The second situation is if you actually want to share the workbook somewhere where somebody would be able to comb through a packaged workbook and see the underlying data. For sensitive information, the case statement isn't going to be sufficient to hide that. So if you're sharing things on a USB drive, email, Tableau Public, this is going to be a little bit better for facilitating that type of sharing. So in this, and we're not going to delve into this quite as much, the idea is pretty simple. It doesn't require a formula, but following the same one, you have your unique identifier that you're going to key off of for replacing things, and then you supply either a name, address, whatever the entire list is going to be, and basically saving that as a data source, adding it into your prep flow, and doing a join on that. Probably a left join is what I'd anticipate. This is going to allow you to replace the columns that are sensitive. You just basically delete the ones that have the sensitive information, rename the ones from the Excel spreadsheet, and you're good to go. That it'll basically take the role of those in anything that's looking at that data source once it's produced. So it is not good if you're still in the process of troubleshooting. Somebody who's looking at the screen and says, oh, what's this? You're not going to be able to look at it without going back to the spreadsheet or Tableau prep to get those values out. So more time consuming. You do require, this is when you really are starting to look at the entire data set, and you're going to want to have a large set of values in there. One of the challenges I found is trying to produce a mock data set using generative AI. Is a lot of them wanted to stop at 120 values or something like that, and then they started repeating the information. So having a compelling list of values is can be a little bit time consuming. One solution that that one of the generative AI models did supply me with is a solution where you can use a Python script to take a couple lists of first and last names, and it'll generate a unique series of combinations using those first and last names. So that might be a better solution than most of them. So that is it for that portion of the presentation. So this is the spreadsheet that I was talking about. This is where you paste your values. These are going to be the fake values that are in there. This is just a list, like I was saying, 336 actual values, not including the headers. I've broken these out just for different solutions, and then you've got your actual formulas. So this is going to be full name, first name. If you have a data set that breaks out the first and last name individually, then you're not going to want just one combined field. You'll actually want both of those. Or if you've got a solution that has last name and then first name. So what I basically do is just copy the list. This is extracted from the Superstore data set. Pasting that in. You can see that that responded as expected. Whenever it sees Sean Miller in the field of question, then we replace it with William Shakespeare. There is a completed version here. We're basically copying everything down. I've got rows and rows of unique values. These are programmers, actors, historical figures, a bunch of different areas of interest. The process within Tableau for this, basically I would just take that list. If I'm really a glutton for punishment, I can try doing that right now. So here's your basically blank field. Going to copy that entire column. There are some really helpful keyboard shortcuts for those who aren't very familiar with Excel that let you select that pretty quickly. So you just post the end on there, and it's got quite a few values. And then these are coming from the customer name field. So customer name is what I'd put in there. Everything's good, apply. And I've already replaced it in this situation. Customer name new is what I'm calling it. So that's supplied. One other step that I would do normally is I would want to basically replace references. There we go. And then pick your new name there. So if you've got several different fields that you're going to do that with, the reason you want to do this instead of necessarily just dropping it into this specific sheet is if you're working off a dashboard like this, it'll supply the new values wherever they're needed for. So that is it in a nutshell. Unless there are any questions, or if you want to shoot them to me in chat, I'll hand over the controls to James for his segment of the presentation.
Great. Thank you, David.
All right. Well,
James?
thank you.
James,
make
if you're
sure.
ready.
So can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Okay, good. So we'll go ahead and share. Okay, so today we talk about overlay and hash, which I actually going to go ahead and go into presentation mode since it's going to be too short. Yeah, Zoom's coming up, so I won't worry about it. So I first read about this on the Floridish blog by Yovo Doyle wrote about several of them, and overlay and hash were two of the ones that he covered. Let's see. So quick question, if you want to, how do you get rid of the zoom controls? Because the zoom controls are over my controls.
There should be a little button to hide the zoom controls.
Okay, there we go. So the first one we're going to do is overlay. Let me go ahead and go into presentation so it's easier to see. And overlay is generally going to be when you want to show some of the real information, but not all of it. And if you're only going to do one side, then using your standard, your right is going to be easier. Just if you just want to show the last four, just do right. But if you want to cut out the middle and leave some on the left and some on the right, this is where overlay could potentially be useful. So the traditional method of keeping the one from the left and four from the right would just be left one, put in what the character that you want to be in the middle, and then right four. But with overlay, you can just say overlay, the field that you want to cover up, what you want to cover it up with, where to start, and how far to go. Now, the where to start is kind of the same for both. You're keeping one, you're starting on the second. But if you notice, where it differs is on how it treats in. The right is independent of the length, and all these are 16, so everything works fine. But if you have a field that has variable length, then you can start running into issues with overlay because it's going to, if it's shorter than it, it's going to cut off too much. And if it's longer, it actually will show more than you want. But you can fix this by, instead of just saying go over 11, you can say, well, go over the number or the size of this field minus 5. And this 5 comes from, I want 4 at the end, one at the beginning. So you subtract those 5. If I wanted 5 at the end, then we would subtract 6. So by using dynamic overlay, then you can still, this will better match with the traditional method. Now, if you wanted a full replacement, which is where you actually will show a asterisk for every character that you're taking out. There's a formula for doing that. It'll be the same for both using the traditional or the overlay. And for it, you'll pretty much say, take the length that you're taking out, and use the space function to say, put in a space, these many spaces. And then you would use the replace to replace your space with your asterisk. And so then whether you're using traditional or using the overlay, you're going to have the same length. Now for me, I think by the time you're getting this many embedded or nested calculations, I find traditional will probably be a bit simpler to read just because you're dividing it up into 3 sections, and each section is very much obvious what you're doing. Or with overlay, with all the parentheses and it becomes a little bit harder to understand what you're doing. The overlay can be used for other things than just covering up. So if you want to have dynamic text, so I have this list, I want to say what the field is or what their age is in a sentence. So the traditional way would be, this person is, make sure you have your spaces at the end here and at the beginning here, so you're not crunching it. They're this old. Well, you actually could do that with your overlay as well by just writing the sentence, the person is X years old, and then overlay that X with the string. The disadvantage on the overlay here is you can only do one, where in the first method, you can put in as many fields, so you can actually put the person's name, their age, everything fits in because each thing is a separate field. With the overlay, you're really only going to be able to replace one. But I thought you can actually potentially use this for masking as well, because if you are using the method 1 and you have a string in there, well, that string is just a text. So you could actually use overlay to write over that field. So method 1 had that the age field in it. The age field started at 15. It was the age is too long. So it's pretty much just, instead of writing over an X, it's actually writing over the stringed field. Now this one is, right now it's not dynamic. All my ages are 2, so that works fine, but that may not be the case. So in this case, you just replace it again with the length. So if you do length, not this time of the dynamic text, you do length of the calculation you were replacing. So if I did length age, then if the age were in the triple digits or single digits, it would still write over the same. And so that's pretty for overlay. If you're very familiar, if you like the left, right, mid, then you keep using that. So the overlay is just a one calculation to replace what that's a left, mid, and right are doing. Now the other one I was covering today is hash. And so hash is you just put your field in the word hash, and it will come up with a string of characters. From the testing I've been doing, it comes up with 14 to 19 numerical characters, and occasionally it will throw in a 20th character of a negative. So it goes in from 14 to 20 characters of just, I won't say disframe it, undecipherable or to be able to tie back. So you have the name here. So this would be the hash of the name. If it's a number or if it's a string, it hashes differently. So 1959 as an integer hashes differently than 1959 as a string. Nulls also hash differently depending on whether it comes in from a integer or as a string. And you can kind of you can combine fields in there. So if you only need like if you want student data at the student level, you can just hash the student ID. But if you wanted a separate record or separate identity for every student for every year, you could just combine the name or the student ID and the term, and it would then hash into a different number. Now, it's not just when you display it. So here, we're actually displaying it, it's hiding the display, but the hash is also useful even when you're not displaying it, because if you're using a table calculation, and let me actually jump down to here. Actually, this. So if we go to this room, so I have the hash name on details. Now, if you actually put the student ID or student name on details, if you wouldn't see it, they were just looking at it. But if you exported the data whatever's in detail, that data is going to come out as well. So by using the hash here, even when you're not displaying this, the information, even if they were to export it, you're still just exporting the hash, not the information underlying it. Now, with 14 to 20 characters, you would think that can cover a lot of records, so you don't really need to worry about duplication, but that actually is not true. So in our records, well, it's going to it'll take a second to load. So I combine student ID, the term, and a class number to come up with it was a 11. It actually ran quicker earlier. So it comes to I have 11 million records, and 99 point something of those records. Okay, here we go. Well, for the top one. So when it's 11.2 million records, 99.77% got its own hash, which is what you want. One is the number you want on these. But you have still about 0.25% that are picking up where the same value is assigned to, or the same hash is assigned to different values. So on about 25,000 records, has two, a hash would have two and 27 times one hash has 3 underlying records. When I just did the GTID itself, which was kind of just under 500 records, that actually had a little bit worse performance. That almost 1% had a duplicate records. And then I also found out, at least with GTID and term, when it came in if I used it as an integer, it had more duplications than when I used it as a string. I said that may vary. I think some of it may depend on how dispersed the underlying value is. So like for the min and max of all these duplicate values, the smallest value is 600,000 apart. So depending on how the spread of your underlying data is, that may affect how much duplication, because I don't know exactly how they're creating the hash. So I did see patterns. So if you get down, for every time the minimum number will go up 1, you can see a pattern in what happens to the maximum number. But once again, it's hard to tell exactly how they're doing it. But it is useful. But the warning is, if you're going to use a hash, make sure you do a count. So use just a fixed LOD to say fix on the hash, count the underlying field that you're actually hashing, so you can see how many of that underlying field is per hash. And I said you want it to be just 1. And that is it for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James. All right, and now we are going to go into our final presentation for the day.
So I'd like to introduce Arty Smith, who is from Kent Denver School. Arty is a veteran math teacher. He has created 2 popular electives in data science, each with a different focus. One class examines the wide world of sports, and the other illuminates issues of social justice. Both classes utilize Tableau on a daily basis. On a national level, Arty has emerged as a leading voice in the push to implement more data science into the K-12 curricula. Yay, Arty. Arty is also a Hall of Fame coach, having led the Sun Devils soccer program to 5 Colorado State championships before hanging up his cleats in 2019. So he is going to present his March Madness viz today. Arty, hand it over to you.
Thank you. Give me a second here to share my screen. All right, you guys see 2025 Men's Final Four?
You can.
All right, beautiful. All right, well, thank you guys. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about this. It's been a very busy week. And in essence, what my class is doing is trying to look at this March Madness tournament kind of in a different way. And the first thing where we start here is by quantifying each team's relative strength, right? We need some way to measure who the best teams are and who the worst teams are. And there are lots of ways of doing that. Probably most famously, a University of Chicago professor named Arpad Elo created the Elo rating system to rate chess players, of all things. And it tends to actually work very, very well for basketball and other sports. I actually don't use Professor Elo's method. Rather, I use what's called a simple rating system. Okay. And I like it for a couple reasons. One, it's kind of the easiest one to understand conceptually. So here are the top 14 teams in the country. At the top there, we can see Duke with an SRS of 30.3. And what that means is that if Duke were to play the average college basketball team, we would expect Duke to win by 30 points. Okay. And if we were to look at Illinois down at the bottom here, 21.7, if they played the average team, we would expect them to win by 21.7. Now, my alma mater is not very good at basketball. Our SRS was -8. Okay. And we didn't make the tournament. But what that -8 would represent is that we would be expected to lose to the average team by 8 points. Okay. Now, the next thing that I do with my class is we need to figure out a way to go from these SRS ratings to probabilities, right? Any analysis of this tournament needs to be based in probability. And I think that this is such a great exercise, right? Almost all of the probability work that is traditionally done in high school math courses are very knowable probabilities, right? The probability of drawing consecutive aces, the probability of rolling snake eyes. But this, fundamentally, the probability, say, of Duke winning the whole tournament, fundamentally, that's an unknowable probability. There's no way that we can know the exact answer, but we're going to have fun trying to get to it. So here's the way that we approach this. Okay, and I'm going to use an example actually from last year's women's tournament. As the University of North Carolina was playing Michigan State. And we can see at the bottom here, Carolina had an SRS of 11. Michigan State had an SRS of 6. Carolina, at least on paper, was the better team. And not only that, but what we would expect in this game is not only Carolina to win, but the most likely outcome would be a Carolina margin of victory of 5 points. 11 minus 6 is obviously 5. And we're going to use this idea to build a probability distribution. Okay, so I'm going to do this step by step here. The most likely outcome is 5. All right. The next most likely outcomes would be a Carolina win by 4 points or by 6 points. Okay. And ultimately, we get a probability distribution that looks something like this. Okay. And I'll then ask the kids, so what part of this distribution would represent Michigan State winning the game? And inevitably, somebody will tell me, well, that would be any value less than 0. All right. And indeed, that is right. And just by eyeballing this, we could probably tease out the win probabilities, right? It looks like, I don't know, maybe 2/3 of the area under the curve here is light blue. All right. So Carolina seems to have about a 67% win probability. We can be more exact, but we would need to develop some kind of a model if we wanted to be more exact. And the model that I like to choose, because it builds upon what we do in AP statistics classes and some other classes in high school, is lay a normal curve over this. All right. And the mean of this distribution is going to be the most likely outcome, that 5-point margin of victory that we talked about before. Now, historically, a standard deviation of 12 points kind of works best here. If we, it's called March Madness for a reason. If we wanted to really emphasize and encourage more upsets in our bracket, maybe we would choose a bigger standard deviation, 13 points, something like that. Okay. Now, the way that we're going to simulate this is we're going to randomly choose a number from this normal distribution with a mean of 5 and a standard deviation of 12. And here's a command that I could use on my calculator. There's lots of ways to do it. But when I did this, I got a value of 8.2. And what this means, of course, is that Carolina won the game by 8 points. Now, last week as a class, we simulated the SEC tournament, all right, which is a much smaller tournament. I think it had 12 teams, and each kid simulated the tournament all the way through. Just to get a feel for this process, they did it by hand. Now, doing it for the March Madness tournament which is a much bigger tournament, would be exhausting. And really, kind of the key here is recognizing that one simulation doesn't give us much information. The real power of this technique comes from simulating this tournament maybe 10,000 times. And with modern technology, it's not too difficult to do that. All right. And if we had more time, I could talk you through that. But ChatGPT made it a lot easier for me to write the Python code to simulate this. Anyway, I have simulated it 10,000 times. And let's take a look at how often teams won. Duke won more than any other team. Duke won 2,600 and something times. Okay. And we can convert that 2,600 times out of 10,000. Duke's got about a 26% win probability. All right. Next up was Houston, 19.1, Auburn, Florida, Tennessee. And we can see these probabilities fall off pretty quickly here. Okay. Now, where this gets interesting, I think, is when we try to find bias in the way that Americans fill out their brackets. All right. And it's a really interesting discussion to ask the kids, first of all, what is bias? Why might it exist? And what might be some explanations for it? And we get some good ones. I live in Colorado, so some of the kids will suggest that if we were doing a bunch of a pool, a bunch of brackets just from the Denver area, well, the Colorado teams would probably be overrepresented, right? They're going to be picked too often because we've got a loyalty to those teams. Another piece to this is, I teach at a college preparatory school, and the schools that our kids are applying to in big numbers, those schools tend to be overrepresented. We've got a bias towards those schools that our seniors want to go to. Okay. But more generally, let's take a look at this. And I want to take a look specifically at two games here. All right. And the first one is Baylor against Mississippi State. And what we can see here is that according to my model, Baylor has a 57.6 win probability, and they're being picked by exactly 58% of Americans, right? There's a real wisdom to the crowds here, which is kind of a cool thing to see. On the other hand, Mississippi State, about 42% each. Okay. I would say that Americans are not showing any bias with this game. All right. They are exactly where they should be here. Contrast that with Colorado State against Memphis. This one's really kind of out of whack. 55% win probability for Colorado State, yet they're only being picked by 32% of Americans. There's an inefficiency here, and we can speculate as to what's causing this. And this is from the ESPN polls. A lot of people would say that, well, Memphis kind of historically has had a better basketball program. I think they've actually got a higher seed in the tournament. So people are maybe not making informed decisions here. They're going with maybe previous history, things like that. Okay. So if I were filling out a bracket, I might include Colorado State as a first round pick here. There's a lot of value to this. Good chance that they're going to win. And if they do win, you're really going to distinguish yourself from a lot of other brackets. All right. So we've looked here at two games. What I want to do now is look at all of the first round games together. All right. And what we've got here on the x-axis is each team's probability of winning in the first round. Again, that comes from our simulation. And on the vertical axis, we've got the percentage of Americans who are picking them in the first round. The black line represents the line y equals x, the identity line. So any teams that are right on that line would be kind of perfectly weighted. All right. So here's Mississippi State. We talked about them, almost perfect here. All right. Teams that are above the line and shaded in darker red colors are the ones that are most overvalued. There's Memphis, the undervalued teams here in blue. Okay. There's CSU. All right. Some other ones, UC San Diego might be a good pick in that first round. 36% chance they're going to win, but only 22% of Americans have picked them. Missouri. Okay, so it's kind of a fun thing to explore. And there's different reasons for each of these. Sometimes it's name recognition. Sometimes it's geographic bias. That could be all kinds of different things. There's also a little bit of systemic bias here, which is kind of interesting to look at. If we look down at this end of the distribution, we see all of these teams, and these are the weakest teams in the tournament, the teams with the lowest probabilities to win in this first round. They all tend to be overvalued, meaning Americans are picking them to win these early games at probably higher than they should. On the flip side, at the very top end, these are the best teams, people are picking them to be upset probably more than they should in this tournament. So it's kind of a fun thing to look at. And the kids love to play with it and use it to make their picks. And one last slide that I want to show you here. We can do the same thing for the national championship, right? This is just first round games. The next graph I'm going to show you is, again, going to be a scatter plot, but we're going to have the probability of winning the national championship on the x-axis, and then the percentage of Americans picking them on the y-axis. And you're going to notice there's a lot fewer teams in this distribution. Okay, and of course that's because there's only really a handful of teams that have a legitimate chance of winning this. So we've got probably 50 teams down here in the bottom left corner with very, very little chance of winning this. Most kind of notably here, again, a real wisdom of the crowd here. Duke University almost perfectly weighted in America's pools. Okay. Interestingly enough, University of Florida. I don't know if there's any Gators in the audience today, but maybe a little bit overvalued. 20% of people picking them to win the championship, but they've only got an 11% win probability. The two kind of most undervalued teams here, if you haven't filled out your bracket yet, these might be good choices to choose as national champions, not only because they've got a decent chance of winning, but because you might distinguish yourself a little bit more, right? Auburn, 17% chance of winning, only 11% of Americans picking them. And Houston, 19% probability of winning, but only 8% of Americans picking them. Okay, you could debate why that is, but it's kind of a fun graph to explore. And there's a lot of mathematics that go into this, and a lot of kind of higher level thinking. We're building upon some of the core concepts of a high school math curriculum, and kind of elaborating on it. So very quickly, that is what we're working on in class this week. It's a lot of fun. Perfect way. Spring break starts in 3 days. Who's counting? But with a class full of seniors a couple days before spring break, to do a data project like this is really a wonderful thing. It's a lot of fun. So I thank you guys for your attention here. If you guys have any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them.
Arty, that was so awesome. I think you have a lot of people who want to sign up for your class. So
cool. Just looking at the comments here. Oh, that's sweet. Thank you, guys. MIT certainly is undervalued, no doubt. Yeah, that's cool. Very cool. All right.
Thanks so much, Arty. And I mean, so Arty told us during the tech check that he had a class to teach at 4:30, and has, like the master teacher that he is, has crammed what was a half-hour presentation into, I want to say, 13 minutes. I wasn't timing it, but that was pretty amazing.
Yes. I hope it wasn't too fast, but yeah, I had to hit the gas pedal a little bit there.
But we do have one question for you. Who are you picking to win it all? Are you picking one of your undervalued teams?
Yes.
Or is this a secret until the brackets are finalized tomorrow at noon?
I chose Houston to win my bracket, although I need to admit that I have never won the March Madness pool, and I've been doing them for a lot of years. So take that with a grain of salt.
Probably going to do better than my flipping a coin / picking by mascot or geographic bias. I did pick up the San Diego schools because I can't wait for Tableau conference.
Beautiful. That's as good a reason as any.
Exactly. I thought so. I mean, I am going to be like scouring my bracket and your dashboard, which is shared in the chat, to come up with some better choices, probably.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
I think there's a link somewhere in here to my Tableau public page, which has this on there, and you guys are free to take a look at it and have some fun with it. And I thank you guys for inviting me and listening today. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. All right, and we are going to close out. We do have some slides about Tableau conference. We're going to speed through them, but then open up breakout rooms where folks who are going to conference or are thinking about it can join and chat a little bit more. So there are a ton of sessions happening at Tableau conference, April 15th through the 17th in San Diego. Some sessions will be shared on Salesforce Plus. They may not be shared live. They may be shared after, with a little bit of a delay. Some might be shared the week after. Not all sessions are going to be recorded, so keep that in mind. However, a lot of the folks whose sessions are not being recorded are being asked to attend or to present at various Tableau user groups. So we will keep our eyes out on that and hope we can get some of those folks to present at HETUG in the future as well. There are also boot camps the couple days before Tableau conference, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff here. We've listed a bunch of sessions both here and in the Tableau conference Slack channel that we're going to share in a little bit. This is very quickly speeding through, just so we can get into chat a little bit sooner. But we really appreciate everyone sticking around for now. Before you leave, we do want to, before you bounce. See, I'm using my sports terminology here. We do want you to tell us what you thought of today's meeting. So Ginny's put some links in the chat for our feedback form. We do have our April meeting scheduled for April 23rd. So about 4 or 5 weeks from today. It's right after Tableau conference. We'll meet Joe O'Brien from Michigan State. We'll have Sanjeev Yang from University of Michigan. And because Michigan is shaped like a pivot, Ginny and I are going to share our presentation on pivoting in Tableau prep. And we'll also do a quick recap of Tableau Conference 25 and maybe identify some sessions that we want folks to come present at HETUG in the future. And if you want to present, the link is in the chat. We also have a whole bunch of TUGs and other Tableau Conference content coming up in the next couple weeks. So on the 27th, both the Madison TUG and the Analytics TUG have some really great content. Andy Cotgrave will be at Madison, and a handful of folks will be talking about best practices and I think color and some of the design stuff that Christian mentioned at the Analytics TUG as well. And then finally, Tableau conference, an official know before you go, the inside track on TC is going to be offered twice next week, both at noon and 7 p.m. Eastern. Same content mostly with a different guest host in each one. Sarah Bartlett, I believe, will be at the earlier one, and Alex Walchuk at the latter. And we again have a whole list of sessions that we think might be helpful. Feel free to add your own if you are going to Tableau conference in the Slack. And with that, I want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone for coming. Thank you to all of our presenters, Christian, David, James, Rebecca, and Arty, who has already had to bounce to go teach his class. And we hope to see you, if not at Tableau conference, at the education meetup, then at our next HETUG meeting on April 23rd. And in the Slack, always in the Slack. The Slack is there all the time, 24/7. So thanks, and we'll go into breakout rooms in a second.